today, the president of the United States denied that he's a Russian agent. And by the way, how extraordinary is this that the question even had to be asked in the first place? This is where we are.
I never worked for Russia, and you know that answer better than anybody. I never worked for Russia. Not only did I never work for Russia, I think it's a disgrace that you even asked that question, because it's a whole big fat hoax. It's just a hoax.
That is President Trump today pushing back against the bombshell reporting over the weekend that the FBI opened an investigation into whether or not he was working on behalf of Russia. Specifically, after the president fired James Comey as FBI director back in May of 2017. And as Trump tried to respond to that claim, he could offer no answers for the question consuming 800,000 federal workers struggling to get by. When will there be an end? When will there be a deal to have this government shutdown come to a close now in day 24?
I don't know if we're close on the deal. This should be the easiest deal that I've ever seen. We're talking about border security. Who can be against it? And the Democrats don't want to do anything about it. They say, oh, it's immoral. But it wasn't immoral 3 years ago, 5 years ago, 6 years ago, and 10 years ago when they all raised their hands to approve a wall.
We'll get you to the shutdown and our coverage of that again, day 24 in just a second. But first to the FBI opening an investigation into whether President Trump was working for Russia. CNN has obtained transcripts from closed-door congressional interviews detailing the debate within the FBI. Then FBI General Counsel James Baker told lawmakers there were two opposing views. On the one side, one was asking if Trump, when he was fired James Comey, was, quote, somehow following directions, somehow executing their, that is Russia's, will. On the other view was that Trump was, quoting Baker, completely innocent. And as we're learning about this internal debate, the Washington Post has this incredible reporting that President Trump has been hiding information on his face-to-face meetings with Russian President Vladimir Putin. And in fact, on one occasion, President Trump reportedly even took the notes from his own interpreter. So let's start this hour with CNN Justice reporter Laura Jarrett. She's from Breaking News left and right on this one. And so, Laura, let's talk about the FBI debate over Trump. What did these transcripts reveal?
Brooke, I think the big takeaway here is how officials at the FBI were just so puzzled and concerned about the president's behavior that they felt like they had no other choice but to open this investigation. And internally, you see from the transcripts now that they really debated a range of possibilities after the abrupt firing, we all remember, of the FBI director James Comey. And the transcripts show how, on the one hand, as you pointed out, some officials felt that they needed to investigate because they didn't know whether the worst case scenario was true, meaning the president was compromised, or if the president was in fact totally innocent. And it's something they grappled with even before Comey was fired, but it really took on a heightened sense of urgency. And ultimately, it all culminates in this case being opened that later then gets transferred to the special counsel Robert Mueller as we now know it.
So that's one bucket of the reporting. The other piece coming out of the Washington Post, which I alluded to a second ago. So run through the various Trump-Putin meetings, Laura, and those specifically that have no detailed record.
It's pretty incredible reporting from Greg Miller of the Washington Post. And in that piece, it says officials say there is no detailed record, even in classified files, of Trump's interactions with Putin on at least five locations over the past 2 years. And the report goes on to detail how the president has gone to really extraordinary lengths to conceal details of his conversations with Putin, including on at least one occasion taking possession of the interpreter's notes. Now, over the weekend, Trump dismissed all of this, saying that anyone could have listened to the meeting. It's up for grabs. But listen to what Kellyanne Conway, his senior advisor, had to say earlier today on all this.
Sure.
Well, the president at that time in 2017 was suffering from a great number of leaks. As you remember, I think week 1 or 2 of being here, his calls with the leaders of Mexico and Australia had leaked. He had an Oval Office meeting in May of 2017. Contents of that leaked. And so there was great concern at the time. I haven't discussed this directly with him.
So she's blaming it on leaks, but of course that raises a pretty big question about the fact that he doesn't have anyone that he can trust at the most senior levels of the government. But in the meantime, lawmakers are raising the question of whether they should be subpoenaing the translator's notes about Eliot Engel, the new chairman of the House Foreign Affairs Committee, said on CNN earlier today with Kate Baldwin that he's going to get to the bottom of what happened and called it very disturbing, Brooke.
Laura Jarrett, thank you very much for that. Besides Presidents Trump and Putin, there is another person who knows what went on in those private meetings, and that is Donald Trump's interpreter. Now, as Laura just mentioned, lawmakers have to decide, will they compel the interpreter to testify? Lawyers and staffers for the House Intelligence and Foreign Affairs Committees meeting today to evaluate what options they have. Democratic Congressman Eliot Engel, the chair of the House Foreign Affairs Committee, telling CNN, quote unquote, all things are on the table. So with me now, Democratic Congressman Gerry Connolly of Virginia. He is a senior member of the House Oversight and Government Reform Committee and is also on the House Foreign Affairs Committee. So, Congressman, welcome, sir.
Great to be with you.
So the big question, will your committee subpoena the interpreter?
I hope so. This is a very grave matter. The fact that we're asking the question as you began this segment, is the President of the United States a Russian operative?
It's extraordinary.
Is itself extraordinary? And this really getting to the truth, frankly, is more important than precedent or executive privilege. The only person besides Putin who witnessed and was privy to the conversation is Marina Gross, the translator. She has to be heard from under oath before our committee.
So you hope that she is subpoenaed, but despite the circumstances, there's a former Reagan, he's also interpreted for Bush and several other presidents. This gentleman says that the idea of an interpreter testifying is, his word, atrocious, suggesting it is a slippery slope, that the president should have the authority to negotiate with a world leader in private. To that you would say what?
No, in the history of U.S. bilateral relations with the Soviet Union and now Russia, no president, no secretary of state, no emissary from the president's office meeting with Soviet or Russian leaders has ever met privately without notes, without some kind of record of what transpired. That's the slippery slope. We now have enough doubts about this president and about collusion with Russia that those doubts can only be cleared up by hearing from the only other witness to those conversations.
In Hamburg in 2017, President Trump reportedly even took his own interpreter's note and said, do not discuss this with his own administration. Why do you think, Congressman Connolly, why do you think the president didn't want those notes out there or even shared within his own people?
Hopefully, Ms. Kellyanne Conway is right, and it was an excess of secrecy because of a sensitivity to leaks. But the dark, cynical view is because he had something to hide. He had something he didn't want people to know he discussed with Vladimir Putin. Could it have been Syria? Could it have been Russian interference with our election? Could it have been how and why he got rid of James Comey? Something he bragged about with the Russian foreign minister the day after he fired him. We don't know. And unless we hear from the interpreter, we're not going to know because there are no notes.
You heard the president in front of the White House this morning saying that he has not worked for Russia. Do you think he's compromised?
Why did I have the eerie recollection of Richard M. Nixon saying to the national audience, you need to know if the president's a crook and I am not a crook?
Do you have any evidence? Do we have evidence?
Well, we're about to get some, aren't we? And that's another reason why I think we have to have the interpreter come before our committee. But I mean, we don't know what Robert Mueller knows.
Right.
I think we're going to discover that fairly soon. We do know from some of the alarm bells rung by the Senate Intelligence Committee that there's this fire behind the smoke. I'm not going to go so far as to say Donald Trump broke the law or Donald Trump in fact colluded with the Russians. We don't know that, but there's plenty of smoke leading to evidence that suggests a lot of people in and around him most certainly did collude with the Russians.
Congressman Gerry Connolly, thank you, sir, very much.